Good morning. I'm Carl Hubbard. As most of you know, I do not have a love affair with microphones, so hopefully this will all go okay. Welcome to this service. As always, it is good to be together in this shared space. In ancient times, in the region of Gilead, beyond the Jordan River, there was a rare medicinal substance from a tree or shrub that was used to heal and soothe. It was a major trade item known as the balm of Gilead. This resonated deeply with enslaved people so sorely in need of healing and comfort. Today, the phrase balm in Gilead is known figuratively as a universal cure and a response of courage and hope in times of despair and hopelessness. The beautiful piece of music that Lynn just played for us is named Balm in Gilead. That music has a rich spiritual history in the African American community. Today, we will be honoring George Bray, a longtime member of our church community at Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church. You will hear today from many people who knew George Bray and who will share their thoughts and memories of him as part of this service. George Bray was a member of this church from 1960 until his death in 1987. His humble, deep compassion for others and his unfailing commitment to the community in which we all live is with us still. We benefit from it still today. George Bray's belief in the power of art and civic engagement to transform and build community was grounded in a deep love.
Our chalice lighting this morning is a reading from Let Us Look First to the Response of Love by Reverend Maureen Killeran. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first at the response of love.
And good morning. I'm Diane Lang, and so happy to see so many of you today. It's George Bray's spirit is with us, and I'm sure he can feel your loving presence. We had a beautiful clip that we were going to show you by an artist. The name of the song was Let Justice Roll. So despite many efforts to try to be able to play that, technologically we're not capable of delivering that song today. But in your order of service, we included the link that you will be able to, if you have access to the internet, you'll be able to listen to that at home. So again, our apologies. Carl is now going to share some brief comments about Bell Hooks, who is another person that we used when we were creating today's service because her words have moved us all deeply. Carl?
Before I mention about Bell Hooks, I'd like to do something that I forgot to do earlier, which is to welcome a very special guest that we have today, who is Janet Mitchell, a longtime community activist and a good friend. Welcome. As many of you may know, Bell Hooks was an African-American feminist author, writer, speaker. She lived from 1952, I just hate this thing, until her death in 1987. She was very interested throughout her whole writing career in ideas of allyship, solidarity, inclusion, and belonging, very similar to the person we are honoring today, George Bray, who also spent a lifetime developing relationships within this church, within this community, and as far as his influence could reach. I'm going to read for you an excerpt from Bell Hooks' essay, Love as the Practice of Freedom. Without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in our struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from an ethic of domination. Without an ethic of love, shaping the direction of our political vision and our radical aspirations, we are often seduced in one way or the other into continued allegiance to systems of domination, imperialism, sexism, classism. It has always puzzled me that women and men who spend a lifetime working to resist and oppose one form of domination can be systematically supporting another. I've been puzzled by powerful, visionary black male leaders who can speak and act passionately in resistance to racial domination, but can accept and embrace the sexist domination of women. By feminist white women who work daily to eradicate sexism, but who have major blind spots when it comes to acknowledging and resisting racism and white supremacist domination of the planet. By examining these blind spots, I conclude that many of us are motivated to move against domination solely when we feel our self-interest is directly threatened. Often then, the longing is not for a collective transformation of society and an end to the politics of domination, but rather simply we long for an end to what we feel is hurting us. This is why we desperately need an ethic of love to intervene in our self-centered longing for change. Fundamentally, if we are only committed to an improvement in the politics of domination that we feel leads directly to our own and individual exploitation or oppression, we not only remain attached to the status quo, but actually act in complicity with it, nurturing and maintaining those very systems of domination. Until we are all able to accept the interlocking, interdependent nature of systems of domination and recognize specific ways that each system is maintained, we will continue to act in ways that undermine our individual quest for freedom and collective liberation struggles. The ability to recognize and acknowledge blind spots can emerge only as we expand our concern about politics of domination and our capacity to care about the oppression and exploitation of others in this world. A love ethic is what makes this expansion possible.
I don't believe bell hooks in the video could have said it better. Thank you. Here we have a picture of George Bray that is from our church. It hangs in the George Bray Hall. And George Bray loved the song, "We Shall Overcome." In fact, later you're going to be hearing from Betty Brenneman, who as a girl remembers, not as a girl, as a young woman, remembers playing "We Shall Overcome" for a service that George Bray had organized for James Reed, for Reverend James Reed, after he was assassinated during the Civil Rights Movement. So there is this generational connection happening today that we're so pleased that all of you can be here for. We believe George Bray would have approved of the video we were going to show you. So we are like studying the whole idea that things are not perfect, right, in any of our lives. But the video you were going to see is an updated version of "We Shall Overcome." And it's a hip-hop version that is done looking at global events happening with threads to the 60s and powerful images from the 60s, and with many children who were a part of the struggle in that time, as well as children today who are marching for gun reform, who are marching for a clean earth. So again, we gave you the link, and if you choose to follow that and be able to listen to that, we encourage you to do so. But because Abby Summer is ready to go, she is going to lead us now in this message for all ages.
I was not expecting to do this, so I don't have the earpiece mic. If it's handy, I'll throw it on real quick. If not, I'll just be really loud in this one. All right, so all those young and young at heart, come on up. This is the story we were going to do upstairs today, so lucky grown-ups, you get to hear it too. Now, this isn't a story about George Bray, but it is a story about somebody who has a dream and is creative and persistent about trying to reach that dream. Which sounds a lot to me like bell hooks and George Bray that we were just talking about. You sure can. Thank you to my assistant, Vanna, otherwise known as Lynn, except we got to put it. All right, are we good? Yes? Okay. So, this is called "Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus." Oh, I know some of you have heard this story. I heard that response. All right, now, kids down here, if you have not, don't tell anybody the ending, okay? If you've heard this story before, don't tell. Okay, don't tell. Let the people who are experiencing it for the first time be surprised. But this is creativity, persistence, grit, and drive. All right, so we're going to start off here with Pigeon, and he's dreaming about driving the bus. Hi, I'm the bus driver. Listen, I've got to leave for a little while, so can you watch things for me until I get back? Thanks. Oh, and remember, don't let the pigeon drive the bus. There he goes. And if you can see who's peeking, it's Pigeon. I thought he'd never leave. Hey, can I drive the bus? What do you think we should say, guys? Please, I'll be careful. I'll tell you what, I'll just steer. My cousin Herb drives a bus almost every day. He's really trying. True story. Look at him change. He's getting frustrated and discouraged, but he's not gonna give up. Ready? Vroom, vroomy, vroom, vroom, Pigeon at the wheel. Yeah, it is exciting, I agree. No! I never get to do anything. He's not gonna drive it carefully, I think you're right. Ready? Hey, I've got an idea. Let's play Drive the Bus. I'll go first. Come on, just around the block. All right, he's gonna really try now. Ready? I'll be your best friend. How about I give you $5? No fair. I bet your mom would let me. What's the big deal? It's just a bus. I have dreams, you know. Fine. Uh-oh. Let me drive the bus! He's tried so many things. This is one of those times where you realize exploding is usually not the answer. I'm back. You didn't let the pigeon drive the bus, did you? Great. Thanks a lot. Uh-oh. Bye. He's driving it away, I know. It's kind of a sad ending right now. Don't worry. Hey. Look at what he sees now. And guess what he's going to dream about now? His dream has changed. He's been flexible. Now, he wants to drive the truck. All right, so all of you who are down here listening, even if this is your first or your 10th or your 30th time reading the story or your 100th, which it's probably mine, I want you to take a minute and think about a time that you really, really wanted something and stick it in your head. And today, you're going to get to hang out with Jen upstairs, and she's going to ask you about that time when we get upstairs. So you've got a little thinking time. All right, let's stand up and do our blessing.
As you go. There are many ways that we give to the life of this church, and the monetary offering is just one of these. Each month, we partner with a local organization and share with them the money that we gather. This month's partner is Janet Payne Foster Children's Scholarship Fund, which offers scholarships to young adults as they leave the foster care system. Janet Payne, if you recall, Kayla Matz is her granddaughter who first introduced this. Janet Payne had begun this effort 16 years ago, and she was really another tireless champion of children in Racine, similar to George Bray. Janet recently passed, so this fund has been renamed in her honor. George Bray and his wife, Dorothy, were foster parents to 7 children. When we have a community event honoring George Bray in June, on June 18th, we know that at least 2 of his foster children and his daughter are returning to Racine, and they will be a part of that, so you'll hear more about that. But both George Bray and Janet Payne knew each other, and they knew that young adults need and deserve the support of their community as they leave the foster care system, and by giving to this fund, it's one way that we're helping that. This scholarship fund is dispersed by Safe Haven of Racine, so thank you for any generosity you are able to do in supporting this important work. Lynn is now going to play us a offertory music piece called Deep River. Thank you. Part of being in community is sharing our joys and concerns, joys and sorrows with one another. This week, all who have a joy or a sorrow, a concern, we invite you to come forward and light a candle. When we are finished lighting the candles, we will sing "There is a Love" together. The words are in your order of service. Thank you, Gregory, for lighting the final candle, for all of our beloveds joining us on YouTube, perhaps. This one final candle was lit for all of the joys and sorrows shared by those of us that did not actually light one. Please join me now in singing our response, There Is a Love. The first singing, Holding Me, then Holding Us. The words are in your order of service. James Cone was a leading Black theologian of liberation in the 60s. He wrote a book called A Black Theology of Liberation. It challenged Christians to reach out to the poor right now in their midst, to build people up when they are torn down. He argued that the gospel is found wherever poor people struggle for justice and fight for their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Cone wrote that Dr. Martin Luther King practiced nonviolence, and it was not just a strategy. It was a way of life defined by love for others, the only way to heal broken humanity. James Cone wrote that bodies are not just tools for production and labor, which lead to generational exhaustion and stolen dreams, as well as stolen children sold as chattel. George Bray knew that art could also heal and feed creativity and dreams. George Bray taught ceramic and mosaic classes to children and adults. He taught the bust of Olympia Brown that is in our church. Thanks again to Gregory. We tried to move it here so that it would be here, but it's safely where it needs to be because it's very heavy and we didn't want to risk it. So we put the picture of her on your order of service. Art can restore and excite. It is only one of the gifts that George Bray shared with our church. Please join me now in a quick meditation that you will be thinking about the spirit of life and how good it is to be together. And let us hold in our hearts the aspirations that we have for each other as we help each other and continue to do the work of justice. A favorite line of George Bray was, "We all long to belong." So let's take this moment to reflect on the ways that George Bray and the work that we do help us to feel like we belong. Thank you. We would like to welcome Janet Mitchell now, who will be the first person giving a memory, sharing a comment about her relationship or her knowledge about George Bray. Please come up. All the way up.
hope everyone can see me. Yeah, I'm Janet Mitchell. I am a member of the Racine Branch NAACP, of which George Bray was the first president. He is the one that got the number of people that he needed in order to form a branch. You know, I knew Mr. Bray because I grew up here in Racine in the early 40s, and I happen to know his daughter. I'm here because of Mike Frontier and Betty Brenneman. And I want to thank both of them for just making me go back and think of some things that I needed to remember but had forgotten. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they mentioned that they worked with Mr. Bray at S.C. Johnson. And Diane mentioned that Mr. Bray had foster children, and this person said that Mr. Bray always was talking about wanting to do things for youth. It's like maybe he wanted to give back, but he knew that if he reached out to people that had the means, that maybe he could do something. And, you know, because of George Bray and others like him, you know, we had the George Bray Neighborhood Center, which today is part of the YMCA. Betty Brenneman also, I think I had forgotten about George Bray's daughter, Sandra, and so I was able to help her in that respect, to locate her, and I'm so glad that I did, because I think she needs to be a part of this, and I think her dad would be looking down on her saying, you're back to where it started, because it did start in Racine, Wisconsin. So I'm going to give it to Betty right now.
All right. Thank you so much.
I did good.
Betty?
So, as an aging person, things constantly change, and I have been noticing some interesting changes in my vision in the past few days. So, first of all, I do want to thank Mike Frontier and Ann for coming, because my first conversation when we were talking about this service was, well, I know that Mike had talked in the past about working with George Bray at the George Bray Center when he was, when they were doing busing for integration. And so then he told me, the person that you really need to talk with is Janet Mitchell. And so he gave me her phone number. I called Janet Mitchell. I asked her if she could give me some information about some of the children that George and his wife had fostered. And she right away gave me the name of the daughter that was adopted and her phone number, Sandra Perez. And on Father's Day in June, which is June 18th, Sandra Perez and two of the boys that are now men that George and his wife fostered are going to be here. They will be here on Sunday from 1:30 to 3 o'clock in the same place that we are going to be having coffee hour in a few minutes. So I totally hope that you spread the word and invite people to be here for that big celebration. One of the sons, Keith, who lives in this area now, told me that he was in the service in Germany when the vigil for his dad's death was held, and he didn't even hear about it because of where he was. So he is grateful that we are doing this. He said it's going to give me a feeling of closure. Okay, so now on to my memories. As I get older, I'm remembering more and more the pivotal things in my life that changed our life a lot, and the people that were involved with that. So to start it off, in 1964, my husband, Bob, and 2 of our children moved to Racine. We came from Iowa. We had no experience with any kind of educational experience with anybody except white people. We came to Racine, Wisconsin, and we learned a number of things that we were totally unaware of. We might have heard about it, but we were not personally involved with it. My husband was focused on going to school and getting a doctorate degree and maybe becoming a professor. That was his dream at that particular time. So we were going to come to Racine, and then during the summer, going to go back to Iowa. He was going to go to school. Okay, so it was a huge change for us in a number of ways. But the one thing that helped anchor it was that we had been involved with a Unitarian group while we were going through and getting our teaching certificate in Iowa. And we met Sunday mornings, and we talked about different ideas and different spiritual traditions and travels. And they were very interesting, and we found ourselves becoming Unitarians at that time. We even had a Unitarian minister come from Iowa City to Cedar Falls to marry us, and then we never lived in a place after that where there was a Unitarian church. So the good thing, really great thing about coming to Racine, there was a Unitarian church. And plus, by luck, it certainly wasn't something we planned. We found ourselves living within about a block of 2 families that were very involved members of this congregation, and then a woman who was teaching French at a high school, Horlick High School. So, because 2 of those families were not locally engaged, 2 of the families and our family became kind of like a family. We'd get together for Christmas, Thanksgiving, celebrations of various kinds. And above the one house where 4 people were living was another family, and 2 people from that family are here now. So this was the family of Jean Arnold, and who is now Jody Spencer. And so we had times with them that would not have happened unless we lived that close. So those were the good things, and thank God, because there were so many things that we had to get used to. First of all, the size of the city, learning about there was inner city schools and the inner city, and we really didn't know what that was. So George Carson and Libby, who worked closely with George Bray, were working on housing issues, dealing with this very issue of what is now, I know, is called redlining. And so I was shocked when I asked, well, couldn't George Bray just move here too? Because he was referenced so often. George Carson would say, well, George would tell me this. And I soon learned, okay, he was talking about George Bray. And he said, no, George Bray could not live in this neighborhood. That was a major focus that changed my life in a lot of different ways. So anyway, my husband was at Washington Junior High. It was an inner city school, so I learned, okay, that meant that this was in an area where black people could live, and so you had more black students than you would if you were not in an inner city school. So he became more and more, okay, so, you know, as they say in teaching, just make it through the first year, you'll do okay. So he was having a lot of challenges with that, But thank goodness we had George and Libby who would just say, okay, this is what it means. And at one point, when we finally got moved in, which wasn't until the end of October, we had a chance to meet, in January, we finally had a chance to meet George Bray in person. And it was so interesting because George Bray was the first black person I actually talked with, and he was so interested in our family, especially when he learned that we had preschool children. And the first thing that he said, well, you know how important it is for preschool children to get some experience in a group and then to learn how to sit down and, be together. And, we just started a program called Head Start. And and he was just so excited about that. And he said, the Head Start program meets in the lower level at the City Hall. And so first I had to find out where City Hall was, when it was.
Step back just a minute. You're like
Too close? Okay, so I then became interested in available times, when there wasn't too much snow, et cetera, et cetera. I started taking our 2 children to the Head Start program, and it was wonderful. 3 days a week, 2 hours at a time, watching the kids run around, have fun, then sit down, have story time, and get to play with each other. And for me, it was an opportunity to see our children play with children that were African American children. I don't know what the preferred term here to use is black children, but it was so fun because they were friendly and just having a good time. Okay, so that's enough on that, but I will reference again and again how George Bray came back to the idea, read. These children have to learn how to read. So we made it through the first year, and then as planned, we went back to Iowa that first summer, and then came back in the fall and found out that George Bray, our Reverend Reeb, had been killed when he went down south to work for voter registration. And so Reverend Hennigus, who was the pastor of the church at the time, was working with George Bray on planning a big memorial service honoring Mr. Reeb. So the way that I heard that George Bray was working with communicating with people in the community, people that were involved with the NAACP and other churches, and also working with Reverend Hennigus to talk him into, to convince him that he needed to go down the next summer because the church did not meet for 10 weeks in the summer. And so, but in order to facilitate Pastor Hennigus going down to work for voter registration, there had to be money raised. So George Bray was the one that was focusing on, we've got to get some money together to get him down there. He was also a big, I think, a voice for doing it. And I'm not sure that Paul Hennigus, from what I heard from George Carson, wasn't exactly interested in doing that. And actually, after the summer of 1966, we found out, according to the people that knew, was his wife was having serious health problems, and soon after he resigned being pastor of the church. But going down and then coming back, and then George Bray, after that, started talking to me and saying, we need good teachers in the inner city. And so Bob and I talked about it, and Bob one time came up with, just looking at the future of getting a PhD, and, what I'm doing here is more important, which was a huge change to hear from my husband. So we talked about it, and we agreed, let people in Iowa know we wouldn't be coming back that next summer. And then George Bray, thank you, in a conversation that we had when I was kind of thinking about now what for me. And he was saying, we need good teachers in the inner city. So, okay. So I started taking classes. I found out what was needed and started taking, it was only about 2 or 3 classes. And by the time I finished in the spring of, so anyway, I started looking at what inner city schools needed a kindergarten teacher, and for some reason I ended up at Stephen Bull. So for the year 67-68, I started teaching, which was a huge learning experience for me. Again, learning culture, learning the curriculum, being involved with what was going on in the community, keeping more abreast of what was going on nationally, and how important so many things were. And it was just a very crowded year and very exciting. And then, April 4th, 1968, what happened? Okay, so Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. And then, after that, there were riots in the city. I don't know who was living here at the time, but there were riots going on. And then I heard from one of the fostered sons last week, who lives locally, that his dad was getting death threats, and that a couple of times there were lighted crosses left on their porch. And he then started seeing lots of police cars around the house, a lot of the during the day and especially during the night. And his dad told him that was to protect their family. So things like that didn't happen with me. It wasn't personal for me, but I could see this was what other people had to live with. And it was shocking and horrifying. And then I started thinking about the curriculum that I was still expected to be teaching. And it just didn't seem appropriate enough for helping children learn to read. So when the final decision for me was when the PTA at Stephen Bull made the decision to take part in the walk, and probably, Janet, you were part of that, the walk to City Hall, in the streets with holding hands, people crying, people just being very upset, but one step forward, moving forward. It was such a powerful experience that I decided that the program that I'd heard about called Follow Through, I was going to find out more about it. I did. I found out it was being, the training program happened in the southern part of Illinois for 4 weeks in the summer of 68, yeah, 68. So I talked with Bob. He agreed. He was home for the summer, yeah. And they had started going to the to the art museum because of George Bray. So they had, okay, you can go. So I would go down on Sundays, drive back to Racine on Fridays. And the program that I learned about called Follow Through was revelationary to me as how to approach teaching with children. And not only did it help what I was, the students that I was teaching the next year, but it also helped me in how I help our own children learn to read. And then for the next 20 years, when I was teaching children with interesting learning styles, whatever, my first focus was on what the follow-through program helped me learn. Then, interesting, 5 years ago, for some reason, I walked into the George Bray Center after the YMCA had taken over, and the person there in charge knew absolutely nothing about who George Bray was. So I talked with Tony Larson, who was still the pastor of the Unitarian Church, and he right away had me go down to the lower level of the annex, and he pulled out the packet that he gave to people at the death of George Bray in '87. And that packet, and I have 20 copies in the other room, and I invite you all to take one, look at it, and be amazed at who this person was. And one of the things that I learned, and thank you, Mike Frontier, because Mike Frontier was a person that I met down in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And he came back in the fall and started the training program for the follow-through program. And when we were sitting down and looking at that, who was one of the main people to get the follow-through program going? George Bray. So thank you. So, of course, Mike, you were the person that introduced me. I had seen Janet, and we had talked a little bit before, but this was a whole new thing. So not only did you give me the number for Sandra Perez, the daughter, but you gave her my phone number, and she ended up calling me first and then emailing me, texting me about who the children were. So that is the basis of how we're going to be planning and expecting people to come on Father's Day, which is June 18th, 1:30 to 3 o'clock. And then Sandra said, oh, good. So she's going to be staying with me. And she said, can I bring my cat? I said, of course. So she's looking forward to being part of the Juneteenth event, which is on the 17th. So anyway, I will look forward to talking with you individually more. There were some other things, as I see the Scots here, that happened when I was down in Champaign-Urbana, and that followed up into the beginning of the folk dance group here in Racine, actually. So thank you for being here, and look at how important, and in so many ways, George Bray was active in this community, and encourage others to also learn about this amazing person and to think about how they can continue the work that he started.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Betty. Please join us now in singing the song We Laugh, We Cry. It's hymn number 354. Stand as you're able. I've got to get a book. you do the chalice extinguishing?
Okay.
I can extinguish it if you want to read, or do you want to go down and
No,
do it?
I'll
Okay, go ahead.
extinguish it and you
Okay.
can read it.
Okay, go ahead. We extinguish our chalice, but not the light of this community. That light cannot be extinguished, for it lives in each of us, reminding us that we are connected, held always in a larger love. There will be several community leaders joining us in the George Bray, talking about George Bray. I was going to say in the George Bray Hall, but he's here because his picture will be here and his memories are certainly with us. But there will be time for you to join us if you want afterwards and hear a little bit more. So one of George Bray's favorite lines again was, "We all long to belong." So please stand as you're able for the postlude and sing along one of George Bray's favorite songs, "We Shall Be Overcome." Our worship is over, our service begins. Go in peace, and we shall overcome together.